Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. We're at the European Council in Brussels, where heads of state and government have been meeting for their last scheduled summit before the summer break. They focused on Ukraine, security and defense, economic competitiveness of the EU, migration, and relations with external powers such as China. My guest is the president of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda. He was elected in 2019 after a distinguished career as an economist, including a stint at the Central Bank of Lithuania. And his country is hosting an important NATO summit on July the 11th and 12th. President Nausėda, thank you so much for being my guest.
Good morning.
You caused quite a lot of comment this Thursday by calling Wagner mercenaries serial killers. Were you trying to focus the minds of EU colleagues on this problem? Are some of them too relaxed about what's happening?
I have to say that it was one of the hottest topics of our discussion because the colleagues know the fact. The colleagues know that what happened, but so far we have limited information what is happening right now. Yes, we have some signals that Prigozhin himself is already in Belarus, but so far we do not have any intelligence data on the Wagner groups or military forces, as they call them, serial killers. According to Lukashenko's announcements, there might be up to 6,000 Wagner fighters in Belarus. At least they prepared the
already now.
No. Now we don't have this information, but this is a plan, as I understand, plan of Lukashenko to build a necessary infrastructure for 6,000 Wagner fighters. And then the most important question is what next?
Just, sorry, if I can interject. So you were with President Zelensky just in the last few days. How worried did he seem to you about this and perhaps what this means for his personal safety if they're physically closer to where he is?
He told me that the figures are very evident. Now, on the battlefield in Ukraine, there are about 20,000 Wagner fighters. And here we are talking about 5,000-6,000. So the proportion of the fighters is, of course, very clear. And this is not the main assumption that these fighters might turn against Ukraine because of many reasons, and because of this unity, nobody knows, is it possible to integrate those fighters again into the regular army of Russian Federation because of the gap in salaries. Those salaries in Wagner are much higher than the salaries paid for regular army. So probably they might be used in Africa, they might be used just to strengthen Belarusian army. I cannot reject this scenario too, but in the worst scenario, and we have to be prepared for every kind of scenario,
and you
they
are
can turn against us.
You're strengthening, yes, you said that on the first day of the summit, and your country has the longest border with Belarus of any EU member state. I gather you have increased security at the border between Lithuania and Belarus.
Yes, we have special plan, cooperation between our army, armed forces, and between security border officials. And we also will spend much more capacities for the intelligence, collecting of intelligence data on the border. And we are asking our colleagues and our allies in NATO to spend adequate attention to this fact during the Vilnius summit. I think this is very important, talking about the context of forward presence, forward defense, and strengthening of eastern flank, to understand this new development and respond to them.
We'll come back to those questions in the context of the NATO summit in Vilnius, but just a couple more things from the EU Council. I mean, did you get the sense that EU leaders in general have really taken the measure of this explosive cocktail, as it was described, not just of Wagner, probably in Belarus, but also the nuclear concerns?
This is idea I represent, and this is very important for me. because right now probably we have lack of information to decide what will happen with these Wagner fighters. But we have to take whole context, as you mentioned. Just take the period of last 6 months and you see a lot of aggressive rhetoric from the Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko. We have this decision to deploy tactical nuclear weapons on the Belarusian soil, which is already in stage of implementation, and probably this is a matter of weeks when the nuclear weapons will be deployed there. And we have still some attempts, not so huge, but still there are some numbers of attempts to illegally cross the border. So this illegal weaponized migration is going on. And taken together, we have this, as you correctly mentioned, explosive cocktail of factors, which should be kept in mind.
So let's come on to what all of this means for NATO. What are your regional defense plans? Because you've said there's no place for the slightest security gap in NATO now. Do you think the entry of Sweden and Finland would change that, or are there going to be gaps whatever happens?
First of all, we should understand, and we should be united in understanding that security situation in our region is not improving, is not stable. It's deteriorating further because of the reasons I mentioned. And of course, this immunity is additional factor of insecurity in the region. So this is the reason why we are looking forward to Vilnius summit, and we are looking forward that regional plans will be approved by Vilnius summit and will become executable by the end of this year.
So you have German troops that are about to arrive in Lithuania.
We have the German troops already, but we are talking about scaling up of forward presence up to brigade size level. And I am happy to announce that Germany decided to deploy full-fledged German brigade on permanent basis as the situation allows. Situation will allow it to do it in 2-3 years because there is infrastructure needed. There are training ranges needed, and we are speeding up the procedures, and we will be able to finalize this job, this infrastructure creation up to until 2026. So those factors are really very positive. But we also should take the decisions on the NATO level, which is related not only to the security of the Baltic Sea, but also Black Sea, and Sweden's and Finland's membership are crucially strategically important. So we are welcome the participation and membership of Finland. We still believe that it is possible to get Sweden at the table in Vilnius summit, but of course probability is not very high.
And what signals do you want the summit to send to Ukraine in terms of Ukraine's possible membership of NATO, and perhaps also based on your recent discussions with President Zelensky as to what his timeline is?
The expectations are there, and President Zelensky told me that yes, they understand that situation does not allow to invite Ukraine to become the full-fledged member of NATO right now, but they would like to see the corridor or procedure or algorithm how to do it if the war is over. And I'm pretty sure that the war will be victorious for Ukraine. We should do everything in our hands to support Ukraine until the end. And then the question is how to bring Ukraine closer to NATO operationally, to create some institutional bodies like Ukraine's NATO Council, which will have held the inaugural meeting in Vilnius. So those decisions are extremely important, and of course bilateral support by different countries, including France. You are really doing a great job supporting Ukraine in this meaning.
Speaking of France, you're aware of the differences between Germany and France on this so-called European Sky Shield initiative. So this is about missile defense in Europe. France is very intent on having what it calls European strategic autonomy, so having its own industry produce the different parts of the shield. Germany seems okay to have American or Israeli technology. I'm guessing you come down more in the second camp.
You know, they were all the time enthusiastic supporters of transatlantic bond. But these recent developments show that we have to take more responsibilities on ourselves. So this is the reason why I think the war in Ukraine was a trigger to start to think more about strategic autonomy in this field too. But we should start probably not from such big projects, but from very simple issues like to spend more on defense, to support Ukraine bilaterally and of course on European Union level too. European peace facility is a good example of such autonomy or initiative. And also training mission of Europe is very helpful in this regard. If we start with this, then we will continue our discussion, and probably at the end of the day we will have larger projects in front of us.
So concrete steps going
step
ahead.
By step, gradual approach is suitable.
Okay, we'll end it there. Thank you so much for being my guest, President Gitanas Nausėda of Lithuania. And I'll be back after a short break with my second guest in this week's program, Jutta Urpilainen, the EU Commissioner in charge of international partnerships. Do join me in a few moments.